So hello and welcome back to Living the Small Business Life. We're in the middle of season 3 now, and we have another guest for you. So today we're here with Jamie Thacker, who's the Managing Director of Hearn's Coaches. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
To start off, do you just want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do?
Sure. So I'm working in my family business, which is Hearn's Coaches. We've been established now for 78 years, so started the business in 1947. Not me, my grandfather.
I was going to say, maybe not you.
No, I look good for it.
You're looking good.
And we run a coach hire company in London and based in Hertfordshire, so we mainly service London and the home counties, running a fleet of just over 60 vehicles at the moment. Wow. One of the largest independent coach hire operators in the area. And that's pretty much about us.
Cool. And do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of your journey with the business? You said obviously it's a family business. How did you kind of come to get involved and get to where you are now?
Sure. So it was about 10 years ago now. I was at university, studying very hard, of course, making sure that I was well versed for the business life. And we had a conversation internally within the family about the future of the business. My grandfather, who started the business, he was 21 when he started it in 1947. He was almost 90 at this stage, and probably wasn't able to carry on for much longer. So we had to really discuss the future. It was my mum's side of the family. My mum kind of at a stage of life where she didn't necessarily want to be taking over the entire business herself on her own. So it was really down to me being an only child, to decide whether I wanted to go and join the family business or whether we look to do something else with them. And at that point I said, look, I'll give it a couple of months to see how it feels. And that was 10 years ago, and I've never been allowed out since.
Right, okay.
But no, seriously, I do really enjoy it. It's been an absolutely incredible journey so far. It's been full of many ups and downs. As you can imagine, the last few years has been probably a tough few years for any business, but particularly in something like our sector with such heavy overheads. And it's been a very, very interesting time, and I wouldn't have changed it for anything. So happy to be part of something that for our family is very special.
Yeah, sure. So are you now full control of the business? It's ultimately down to your decisions that are running the business.
Yeah, so I take that managing director role. So I'm making all the day-to-day operational decisions and also kind of making most of the strategic decisions as well. My mum and I very much work as a team, so while she's not actively involved in some of the decision making day to day, she sits as more kind of like chairwoman director of the business, and is kind of there. We make the big decisions together, but generally speaking, she's got to that point now where she just allows me to get on with day to day stuff and make sure that we're running the business successfully and running it to the highest standard we possibly can.
Okay. And you were saying that obviously now you have a fleet of about 60. What did the business look like 10 years ago when you first stepped in?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think the way that the business was running 10 years ago was we were predominantly a school contract business. So, you know, in the coach hire sector, there's all of these small subsectors. You've got like the school coach hire side. You've got the more business coach hire and tourism coach hire, sports team specific. And we were very much in that school coach hire category. A slightly older fleet, probably an average age of about 12 to 13 years. And we were running probably, I would say, about 35 vehicles day to day. I think we had about 40, but we're running about 35 day to day. Over the period of my first 5 years there, we decided that we didn't want to have all of our eggs in just one basket, being the school side, because you never know what's going to happen when you have your entire business in one part of the industry. So we started looking at other ways that we could look at the more kind of tourism side and the corporate side, and we started dipping our toe into that water. The business grew quite significantly over the first 4 or 5 years that I was involved. We had a bit of a rebrand right at the beginning, just made our fleet look a bit more uniform, gave it a bit more of a corporate feel, and then we started building that business on the private hire side. and it was going very, very well. We were up to about 45 vehicles that we were running day to day by the beginning of 2020. And then obviously COVID happens.
Yeah.
And like every other business, pretty much, we were grounded for the best part of a year. So, you know, the business turnover had probably grown, I would say, by about 50 to 60% in that time. The fleet size had grown by probably about similar. And then, you know, we had nothing for about 8 months. I think probably about £20,000 turnover in about 8 months. So it was very, very poor turnover.
Wow.
And the costs, largely speaking, were still there. You know, we were very, very lucky. We had some excellent relationships with some suppliers, such as our lenders, etc., that gave us some, you know, pretty decent leeway to recover from that. But fundamentally, you have to carry on running your business. You have to carry on paying your bills. You know, still have staff to pay, still have other, you know, vital things like insurance to be paying, etc. So we had to rethink the business very, very quickly. And by the September of 2020, we were probably, I would say, amongst the first of the coach hire businesses that were actually running again in a pretty consistent fashion. You know, a lot of the businesses we were talking to probably didn't actually start up properly again until June or July of 2021, when things started to plateau out a bit more.
Yeah.
But we were back in from really September, full staff, no more furlough or anything like that. So yeah, we were quite aggressive with the way that we started the business back up again. And then after that period, and once we started getting back on our feet, I had the rather stupid idea of buying a competitor coach company.
Right.
Which,
As you do.
You know, yeah. You know,
You just
obviously,
wake up one night with a cold sweat and I need to do this.
yeah. I mean, it wasn't a stupid idea. It actually worked out really, really well. But it probably was against the grain of what traditional thinking would have been at that time. You know, traditional thinking would have been to batten down the hatches, keep a low profile, just try and kind of ride out the storm. The attitude that I took at the time was, well, it's now or never. We've got a unique opportunity here to really make heavy strides in a difficult market. Let's go for it. Let's see what happens. So it's a local coach company near to us that we'd known for a number of years. We knew what their business was like. We knew what their work profile was like. We saw humongous amounts of synergies, and we just felt at that stage that it was a risk worth taking.
Was that so? I mean, we were still talking about it being kind of part of everything that happened during the pandemic and the challenges around that. Do you think that company, you know, were they struggling more than you? Was it a case of they might not have continued if you hadn't taken them? I mean, I'm not saying that you kind of came to save them, but were they also struggling to the point at which you saw they might go out of business, or?
It's a good question. I don't think they were at that stage. I think they definitely had a bit of a staffing issue in that they didn't have enough staff. And that's a problem that I think every business in the coach hire industry faces. Even we face that on a fairly regular basis. But they definitely had a staffing issue. And I think it's more from the point of view that the owner at that time of the business had probably just had enough. Wanted to retire anyway. I think wanted to retire pre-COVID, and then had been through COVID and thought, you know, why am I still doing this? Yeah. We worked with them and worked very closely with them to make sure that we had a smooth transition over to our business. We still have a good working relationship with them now in terms of you know, we have good terms, and you know, a lot of their staff, I'd say 90% of their staff that joined us on day one are still with us today, which is really good.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a really, really good acquisition that at the time felt very scary, but it's worked out well. And now, as I say, we're running across the group of two companies. We're running just over 60 vehicles.
Are they branded as Hearns, or are they still kept their original name and identity?
So some of them still have the original name and identity, but we are gradually phasing that out, just because I think it's hard enough to have one brand going, let alone two in the same geography. So, you know, ultimately the two businesses are so similar in what they do in terms of the same work profile, the same clients even. It doesn't really make sense to be having two brands that are effectively trying to compete against each other.
Yeah.
Better off having one synonymous brand over time.
Okay. And then just sort of going back to you sort of completed your university and straight into the business. Did you start by driving a coach, or where did that journey
that's
start
a good
for you?
question.
Was it out in the yard, you've got to clean the coaches, and were you stood there thinking I've got a degree and I'm stood here washing coaches, or what was that journey like?
I mean, ultimately, I've done a bit of everything. The only thing I probably have never touched is the mechanical side. I wouldn't trust myself in that area.
Does that mean you can drive a coach?
I can drive a coach.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
yeah. I will admit that I haven't done it for a number of years. So if you see me behind the wheel of a coach, best to get out of the way.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, I'm not going on that one.
Yeah, but I think ultimately it's really important to have a core understanding of the business, and I saw this through someone I used to go to school with. That he now works for Marks and Spencer. And I saw that he very often goes down to the shop floor and is serving customers and things like that. I think it is important to maintain that understanding of your business and not just sit in your ivory tower and just hope that everything's working out well. So whilst I don't really go out driving that much anymore, I still make sure that I go and actually physically see our coaches, drivers, etc. I very often go down to our schools or our event pickup points or anything like that, and just to see what's going on. I think it's really, really crucial that you maintain that hands-on approach.
Okay. So did you start, where did you start? Did you just shadow your mother, or were you shadowing your father, or were you shadowing your grandfather? What was the sort of journey, that start to where you are today?
So I think when I started in the business, we're working in an industry that is not the most technologically advanced industry. And for me, I saw that as an immediate avenue because I'd always been quite interested in the tech side of things. Obviously being a younger generation, you automatically have an understanding of things that maybe the older generation don't have an understanding of. So I found my niche in working in the more technology side of the business, and what I found is very quickly that turned into more of a business development role. We were probably lacking someone to actually go and speak to key clients, build relationships, etc. And for me, that was something that I really enjoyed doing. So on day one, I probably came in and just did a bit of everything, but very quickly found my niche, and that was dealing with the customers directly. I also got very, very interested and very ingrained into the whole operational side of the business. So I found the whole concept of things like scheduling vehicles and drivers very interesting, because I saw that's really the difference between earning money and making a loss is being efficient with your resources. So I got really, really interested by that, and I started looking at that more scientifically than maybe what had been done previously. Again, using technology to really improve that and make that as good as it could be. So that was really where I started. And then just it really grew from there.
Good. Today, transport is a difficult industry. Any business has experienced hike in fuel costs, insurance costs. Compared to pre-COVID, where are you sat now? Have you seen a massive impact on your business in terms of costs spiraling out of control for your business and your sector?
Yeah, costs are completely different to what they were 5-6 years ago, to an unrecognisable level. I mean, we're seeing staffing costs go through the roof. I mean, we're talking in some areas 50-60% higher than what they were 5-6 years ago.
Wow.
We're talking huge insurance hikes. Fuel is obviously one of those very, very unpredictable and concerning elements, because there's so many external factors that will impact the fuel price, and all you need is some instability on the world stage, and suddenly you could be paying 10, 20, 30% more for your fuel. Equally, it goes the other way. So it's such an unpredictable one, the fuel, and obviously running the vehicles that we do are quite fuel heavy. So
Yeah, I mean your fuel
just a
bill
little
is
bit.
quite a lot.
yeah, we are on the Christmas card lists of a number of fuel suppliers. But
I can imagine.
It's one of those very unpredictable elements that I try not to lose too much sleep over, because you generally find as quickly as it goes up, it also comes down again. And actually, if you look at fuel costs, what they were 10 years ago versus now, they haven't really changed that much.
Yeah.
They go through their peaks and troughs, but generally it is quite stable day to day. So, but definitely staffing costs have increased massively in our sector compared to what they were. I don't actually think that's a bad thing. I think possibly the industry was guilty of not paying the right money for what we were actually asking people to do 5 or 6 years ago. But you have to stay within the industry brackets, otherwise you simply would be uncompetitive and simply would not be able to run. That's definitely got better in recent years. I think we're definitely paying a much better wage for the level of responsibility that some of our staff have, which is really, really good. And I'm pleased that that's happened. Obviously, it's been difficult getting there because it happened so quickly, but maybe that needed to happen because, it's no secret that in the transport world, staffing is very, very difficult. The haulage sector went through this really badly a few years ago. We've been through it as well, but it just wasn't publicised as much because it's such a small industry compared to haulage. So we had to do something, and that was the obvious one.
And the challenges, so when you're talking about challenges around staffing, and I think you mentioned this before, is it mainly around drivers, or are there other elements of your staff where there are challenges in recruitment as well?
Yeah, I think the drivers would be a very obvious one to pick up on, because it's definitely harder to find good quality drivers today than it was 10 years ago. There's absolutely no shadow of a doubt about that. But I think, and Ben, you may see the same as me, I think in any small business, it's very, very difficult to recruit staff. We're going through a stage now where most people go to university when they come out of school. Most of them are grabbed by big corporates who are taking in thousands and thousands of employees every single year. There's a massive brain drain of young people from all over the country focusing on areas like London as being their only area of interest. A lot of people want to work from home, which for our business is very, very difficult. I've yet to find a coach driver who can work from home, but we're working on it.
Yeah.
And I just think that generally speaking, in the small business world, it's incredibly hard to find people nowadays compared to how it used to be, because the corporate world, as it were, offers so many more benefits and advantages that simply as a small business you can't keep up.
Yeah, you can't compete. We were discussing this off camera, weren't we, about the benefits and privileges that you get from a blue chip, let's say, or a corporate, compared to what a small business can offer. But I also see, the thing is, from being a small business owner, I can see the other benefits and privileges that potentially a corporate wouldn't give. In terms of, we constantly get it, I'm sure you do. Oh, I've got a nip out on Thursday afternoon, the kids have got a sports day, do you mind if I just shoot off? Yeah, that's fine, off you go. Whereas a corporate, that would be, holiday form submitted through to the HR department, signed off, back, may not be approved. So I think there are a lot of, benefits to working for a small business, and there is a corporate. There might not necessarily be financial in terms of pensions, health schemes, various other bits and pieces, but you're quite right. It's very difficult to attract a decent member of staff and keep them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, ultimately you're right, Ben, that small businesses actually have far more to offer people than maybe big corporates do in so many ways. But it's very hard to advertise that, because you are a small individual business trying to advertise your benefits. And ultimately, we know absolutely every single person in the business. If they came up to us today and said, sorry, but I need to have some time off because of a family disaster, there's no question, it's a given. Yeah. And in other worlds, in the corporate world, that simply doesn't exist to the same degree. No. You are really a number. On such a level that if you become unproductive or unuseful to them anymore, you're just dispensed with. And we simply don't operate like that. And I don't think that people realise the benefits of working in a small business, and actually you're not pigeonholed into a particular responsibility. You are taking on so much responsibility that you end up by learning so much more. You're doing so much more within the business, and it actually makes the whole job so much more rewarding and interesting, rather than just sitting at a desk every day and focusing on one individual item that you've been tasked with.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, it's very difficult to advertise that, because you can't put, if you need to attend a sports day as part of your benefit package or anything like that. It's very difficult to attract those staff.
But are there, because you were also talking about when you took over that competitor as well, like 90% of the staff had stayed with you. Are there things outside of those benefits that you do, I suppose, for your employees, or deliberately to kind of create that kind of atmosphere in your business? Do you think there's things that you work on to create that team?
I think it's really important to run a firm but fair business, in the sense that, you've got to understand that people do make mistakes. You've got to understand that most people don't wake up with the intention of causing your business or you a problem each morning. If there are issues that happen, and, in our industry, people have accidents, or people are late occasionally, or various other things that cause us operational pressures, you've got to treat them like human beings. And I think the biggest problem that I've seen in other businesses is where the employees stop being treated like human beings and start being treated like assets. Ultimately, they're not tools, they are people, and people have their own individual issues. So ultimately, for us, it's all about treating our staff as individuals, understanding their wants and needs, and trying to be as firm, trying to be as firm but fair with them as possible. I think a big thing for us is that we've really, as a business, we've really invested in making sure that we give them the best possible working environments, and by working environment for our drivers, that means vehicles. Ultimately we do that for our customers, but I always think about the driver kind of experience as well. No point going and buying a load of vehicles that customers love but drivers can't stand to drive. Also, it's about making sure that they are being paid fairly and being paid well. We always try and make sure that we're paying over and above the industry and the area average. And I think just making staff feel like they're looked after is so critically important in a time where there is choice.
So I think for some of the other guests that we have had on the podcast, often their experience of setting up a small business is that it's something that they've come to after having a career somewhere else, whereas you, as you've said, came to running a small business straight out of university. So what was that like in terms of, this is the career that you've always had? How has that kind of been different for you?
Great question. To be honest with you, it's been a very difficult one for me, actually, because I came from a school where most of my friends went to university, and then from university, most of my friends went into the city to go and work in insurance, finance, law, and various elements like that. I was the only person that I knew out of my friend group that kind of bucked that trend and went into a small business from day one. And I think as a 21-year-old coming out of university, where it's been 3 years of good fun times, partying, studying hard, of course, as I said earlier.
What did you study at uni?
I studied business management.
Okay.
So went to Nottingham University, which is known for being a really lively atmosphere, and it's known for its good times. And then you go into the life of small business, which is suddenly anything between 14 to 18 hour days and 7 days a week, and you are working literally round the clock just to keep something going. Meanwhile, at 21 years of age, you see all of your friends going into all of these grad schemes where work is optional, and it's a lot of social events and a lot of inductions and partying and socials after work and being down at the pub in Leadenhall Market and all that kind of stuff. And you do look over the fence as a young person and say, have I really made the right choice here? But ultimately, that very quickly wears off. And I think probably if I spoke to all of my friends now, they would agree that very, very quickly becomes boring. And ultimately, I'm so grateful to have had the discipline, especially coming from my parents and my grandparents, who have always been incredibly hard workers, to sit there and go, no, do you know what? We're actually building something here, and the 5 p.m. pub night on a Thursday can wait for another time, because actually what we're doing here is so critically important. It's been so rewarding to actually see something grow over the last 10 years or so that actually we can say is down to us and down to the fruits of our labour.
So it's an interesting point you made about the sort of Thursday, Friday, get off, go to the pub. My son is now 20, he'll be 21 this year. That seems to have died a death for that generation, and perhaps a few generations before him in terms of age groups. They don't go to the pub anymore. No. It's a very rare occasion. It's not a done thing. It's life seems to be more centred around work, gym, healthy eating, and they balance that quite well, which is interesting because in my generation it was and I started in this industry when I was 19, it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then back to work on Monday. So, I think you're right. You probably, Jamie, with how old you are, probably hit it just at the right time, because it started probably to phase out as the years sort of went on. Yeah. It started to gradually drop off. And I think the world is changing and staff are changing, and the perception of the younger generation is that it seems to me like everything comes to them, not go out and look for it and work for it. And you're a testament to your business and your family, what you've achieved and what you've done. We've known you now since 2016, I think it was, when we first engaged. What you've done has been incredible. From what I remember walking into the office and paperwork was sort of stacked around everywhere, to your new office that you've got now. You've done an incredible job.
Yeah. And I suppose one of the things that you're kind of describing in there is, like, with longer days and putting more in, is something in there kind of around work-life balance. And I think I've picked up some conversations between you and Ben recently as well, that work-life balance is something that you've been working on a bit more. How is that going?
He's worked on it, but he hasn't achieved it yet.
Well, I mean, do we ever actually achieve it? But how have you, you've clearly got to a stage where you've wanted that balance a bit more. What sort of things have you done around kind of trying to work on that?
I think everyone, after COVID, no matter who they were, was looking for a better work-life balance. And, we're in an industry where you've got to remember that our day starts when most people are waking up, because we are taking people to school, to work, etc. And our day ends when most people are already at home, having dinner, because we're taking people home again. Yeah. The average day for our business, core peak hours, is somewhere in the region of about 16 to 17 hours a day. So I've always found that personally a massive challenge, because I like to be around for the entire peak period. And sometimes, if we've got events going on in London or something like that, that peak period can then end at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, and then start up again at 5, 6 the next morning. So that's always been a massive challenge for me personally. And as Ben alludes to, I'm probably not the best at promoting work-life balance. That's always been something I've really struggled with. But I think if we talk about staffing and recruiting the right people again, that's something that we as an industry, but I think the small business world has to be hyper aware of going forwards. Because when I first started, I looked at our own business and I looked at other businesses in the same industry as us. And it wasn't uncommon for people to be sitting doing 12 to 14 hour days in the office 5, 6, 7 days a week. And it was just expected. That was the norm. And perfect example, we had people in the business that were very used to doing crazy hours. And you would look at that, and when you went to recruit for them when they retire or something, you look at it and think, well, how am I going to write this into a job description? Must be available 24/7, and holidays will be frowned upon. Yeah. It's not something that really you can actually recruit staff on. And so for me, I was very passionate about finding that work-life balance for the team. In reality, what that's meant is we've probably actually doubled our staffing commitment in the back office side of things compared to what we could have, compared to maybe some of our other industry colleagues. But ultimately, I was passionate about making sure that when we were recruiting for these jobs, we could say, quite honestly, you are going to be doing between a 40 and 50 hour week, and that is normal, and that is what's expected, but it's not going to be massively more than that. Whereas even now I see other businesses similar to ours where the people are working 24/7, and it is just crazy. I just don't understand. We're already on the back foot, as we said earlier, in small business, in finding the right staff. And if we're trying to force people to work crazy hours, we as directors of businesses, owners of businesses, we choose to do that. We can't force our staff to do that as well.
The one thing that you mentioned earlier were fuel costs that are very fluctuating, and that must be incredibly difficult to plan for. Especially with insurance renewals. We've just recently done ours with no claims from the previous year, yet ours has doubled for no apparent reason. So fuel cost is obviously an element of yours. Electric, is that something you've looked at? Is it feasible for your industry?
Yeah, I was going to say, can you have an electric
can you
coach?
get electric coaches?
Very well timed question.
You just bought one.
We have.
Oh, right.
So
wow.
So last month we were the first coach company in Hertfordshire to buy an electric vehicle. We're not the first in the industry. There are probably, I wouldn't like to put a number on it, but there are a number of electric coaches out there. There is a distinct lack of choice at the moment. So there's really only one manufacturer that provides to the UK market that's providing electric coaches. So
it's not Elon Musk, though, is it?
It's not him. It's not him.
Because that's going to be a weird business decision.
Yeah. No, it's not him. But there is a company that's providing electric coaches to the UK market, and we have bought our first one. It's the first one, as I say, in Hertfordshire. We think that there's definitely a place in our industry for this. Is it going to be the future of transport? Who knows? Because ultimately hydrogen is being bandied around as a possible for heavy vehicles. We've got the idea of hydrogen fuel cell or even hydrogen combustion engine, which is a really interesting concept. I think ultimately going forward into the future, diesel is still a very, very valid choice for heavy vehicles, because ultimately we are working to such strict engine regulations now that the emissions from a Euro 6 coach are incredible compared to what it was only a few years ago. It'll be interesting to see where the space goes, but we're definitely on that bandwagon now of joining the electric side of things and seeing some distinct advantages of it.
Is there infrastructure? Because obviously with electric, the infrastructure is key. You have to be able to charge at certain points. Is there an infrastructure for electric coaches? Or is it just that you have to charge it where it's overnight? Or I don't know.
You've got a charging station in your yard and that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Diesel generator on a tow bar.
It's outside your house with a plug in it. No, you do know what I mean.
No, so there are charging points, few and far between. I wouldn't like to risk a long distance journey at the moment, but ultimately the haulage sector, who are really the kind of big boys of the transport industry compared to us, they are developing infrastructure for heavy vehicles, which we'll be able to latch onto in time. But I very much see it being a case in the future that there'll be almost two fleets. There'll be your urban fleets, which will be electric vehicles, and they'll be the ones that go around town, go around the city of London to do local-based work, and then there'll be your long-distance fleet. I very much see that as a high potential of how it could look in the future.
And insurance costs. Are you finding any difference on insurance costs for insuring an electric vehicle to a diesel vehicle?
Interestingly, not so much at the moment, although I anticipate that probably will happen. Ultimately, it's a small part of the industry at the moment, so I don't think there's been too much of a focus on that. Yeah. But the coach industry in general, and the coach and bus industry, struggles because there's not much choice in the insurance market. I think there's only about between 5 and 7 insurers in the whole country that will even insure the coach and bus hire risk. Really? So yeah, it's a very, very niche industry, which means that obviously there's not a huge amount of choice, and it's an expensive part of the business for sure.
Okay.
You need to tap up one of your friends from university that's gone into insurance or
reinsurance.
Be like, look, I have an opportunity for you. Let's get this sorted.
I'm not sure they'd see it as an opportunity.
Interestingly, I see a couple of things in the news about some Chinese taxi firms. I don't know if you've seen them. So they're not actually charging their electric vehicles. you basically pull into what we would know as an old car wash at the side of a petrol station. The car is then lifted 2 or 3 yards off the floor. A machine comes underneath, takes the battery out, drops down under the ground, goes to a charging shelf underground. The new battery comes and the car is complete with a full battery charge in under 3 minutes. To me, that makes more sense than putting these huge infrastructures for charging vehicles. Because I'm sure if you, as a coach as a coach company, had a place where a coach could literally just pull in, with under 3 minutes, the batteries are dropped out, a new one's put in, and off they go again on a journey. That sounds more sense to me than trying to continually charge your vehicle from a home or, I don't know. The Chinese have obviously, I'm assuming that is a Chinese coach, or is it?
Yeah. So it's interesting because the coach hire space, there's not actually that many manufacturers of coaches anymore. There's currently 0 production in the UK, which has changed in the last few years. Europe was the main coach manufacturer, but there's a lot of companies that have gone into administration, haven't been able to keep up with increasing costs. Meanwhile, there's companies out in China, the company that we deal with, they're producing something like 400 and something vehicles a day. Wow. And that is more than what most of Europe is producing in months. So, their scale is just incredible. And what that means is that they are so far ahead of the technology curve, and they are developing electric vehicles with ranges of 2 to 3, maybe even 400 miles in some cases, and rapid charging solutions, especially on not on so much the coach hire side, but on the bus hire or the bus network side. You'll find that buses will pull up at a bus stop now, can charge up for a few minutes, and that'd be enough to get them another hour down the road or something. So the technology is changing at a rate that we couldn't possibly keep up with. And I think any conversation we have today based on how we think the future is going to look, let's go back 15 years, let's have a conversation about how we thought it was going to be 15 years ago for now. And we would never have even assumed it was going to be electric coaches on the market. So I think in the next 10 to 15 years, it's going to be an incredible amount of innovation that we couldn't even possibly begin to understand now, especially around charging speeds and charging infrastructure, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, kind of to start to wrap things up a little bit. So we talked a lot about, you running a small business. When you speak to other people about running a small business, like what advice do you give to other people as small business owners?
I think that's a really good question. I think for me personally, it would be about trusting more and verifying more, because definitely for when I first started in business, I was possibly a bit too trusting when I first started, and I just assumed that everyone had the same levels of passion and energy for something that I did, and was probably let down a few times. So then I almost flipped that on its head, and I started trusting less, to the point where I tried to do too much, and I was trying to do all the tasks in the business myself, and that's just not sustainable. You cannot grow a business if you are trying to own every single process. So you've got to be prepared to let go and accept that it'll be done maybe 80% to the standard that you were going to have it done to. But ultimately, there are some good people out there who you can trust to do things. And that's where it's so critical that you have the right people and you put them in place in the position of trust to do those things. But equally, you should never stop verifying, never take your eye off the ball. Always make sure those things are being done, because ultimately, if it's something that's critical to your business and it's being ignored, it could cost you dearly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, Jamie. It's been really, really good conversation.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's been interesting listening to your business and your journey that you've had.
Yeah.
And long may you continue your success with a family business.
Yeah,
no, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Living the Small Business Life. And thank you so much to our guest, Jamie from Hearn's Coaches. If you're watching this and thinking that you'd also like to join us as a guest, then do get in touch. We'd always love to have a chat. And as always, like and subscribe so you hear about the new episode first.